Welcome to Two Truths, where we explore controversial topics in religion, philosophy, and history from at least two different perspectives. I'm Dr. Darren Iammarino, and today we're going to be asking the question, are you an acolyte of the Jedi or of the Sith? So, in order to answer that, pretty obviously we need to answer our first question, which is, what is an acolyte? An easy definition for an acolyte is someone who's a follower or a helper, but typically it's like someone who is a follower or helper in a religious service. Okay? Now, as it likely pertains to the show coming up on Disney, it's just referencing someone who's going to be a follower of the ideology of one or the other sides, right? Of the light or dark side of the Force. Now, let's look at those. Let's look at the light side and talk about the Jedi first. And I've got a quote here, kind of cherry picking various aspects of the Jedi code, different versions of it. And I think it'll help us to get a sense of whether or not you resonate on the light side. Okay? So here we go. A Jedi's promise must be the most serious, the deepest of his or her life. A Jedi seeks not adventure or excitement, for a Jedi is passive, calm, and at peace. A Jedi knows that anger, fear, and aggression lead to the dark side. A Jedi uses the Force for knowledge and defense, never for attack. There is no try, only do. Believe and you succeed. Above all else, know that control of the Force comes only from concentration and training. A Jedi does not act for personal power or wealth, but seeks knowledge and enlightenment. So let's stop there. That gives us a good sense. I'm going to try and do a quick summary of the core concepts. Compassion, peace, knowledge, not having any anger, not having any fear, not having any aggression, right, or attachments, not being concerned with adventures, excitement, personal wealth, or personal power, and a concern for social justice overall. So if any of those ideas or all of them resonate with you, then you probably are someone who would identify more with the side of the Jedi. And if you're asking yourselves, well, so what? This is just a fictional, right? It's a fictional creative work on the part of George Lucas. Yeah, that's true. However, it's also been a global phenomenon, right, for decades. And there are very serious movements to make it a religion in different countries, and it has achieved and effect this status in certain parts around the world. I don't want to get into too much of that and the details of that. A lot of it coming from online forums and the online culture or gaming culture that help to grow that part of the movement. I do want to focus on what are the philosophical and religious themes that we find in both the Jedi and then the Sith. So since we're on the Jedi at the moment, let's take a look and ask ourselves, what religions could we match up or compare to the Jedi Creed and the general sort of Jedi ethic? And I think Buddhism is the main thing that comes to mind to me. But to be more specific, foundational piece of Buddhism is known as the Four Noble Truths. Right? That's kind of like your bedrock thing that you're going to learn. The first noble truth is that all life is suffering or dis-ease. Now, of course, the Jedi would likely accept this and want to do something about it because they have compassion, right? And care for others and social justice. The second noble truth within Buddhism is, I think, the most pertinent piece to all this. The cause of all this human suffering and dis-ease is from excessive clinging and desiring. Effectively, attachments, right? Attachments are the problem, not so much a passing a drink of water that comes and goes. That's not really the issue. It's more coveting, obsessive desiring. That's what causes you to act not in alignment with reality. Reality is in constant change and flux. If you are fixed on a person and an object and you want it to stay the same, you're bound for ruin, right, and failure. So I think that's the strongest direct parallel between established religions that have been around a long time and sort of the Jedi code. Second noble truth, idea of impermanence. These are core things within Buddhism. In fact, Buddhism will even take it to the degree that there is no soul even, right? There's no enduring soul substance. We're actually a collection or aggregates of things coming together. And that brings in two other things that are also probably relevant here. The idea of emptiness, meditation, and really, here's another core concept for you, pratitya samutpada. So this idea in Buddhism means dependent co-arising or dependent co-origination. And it's, to simplify, it's the idea that we're all in this kind of web influencing everything else. So to a greater or lesser extent, one thing is going to affect the coming to be of something else. That idea of us all kind of being connected, whether it's through the Force or whatever, feels still like very Jedi in nature. Another thing you might hear on some other videos out there, Taoism. I wouldn't be surprised if that's brought up. Taoism shares a lot with, say, like Zen Buddhism. And again, there's going to be this focus on the role of receptivity and emptiness, this Wu Wei concept. I have a separate video on Secrets of the Sages on Taoism, if you're interested in learning more about that. How doing non-doing or non-calculative action is a core aspect of Taoism. And just more generally in sort of Chinese culture, ancient Chinese culture, Chinese religion, you'll have this idea of qi, this sort of subtle energy or vapor. If you think about like, almost like mist, steam coming off of a lake early in the morning or something like that, where you can barely even see it. It kind of straddles the line between the visible and the invisible. That's very much in line with the concept of the Force. And that was influential for George Lucas. So those things have probably been stated out there in books and other videos. I don't know if I've ever heard anyone say anything about New Ageism or spiritualism, because in this tradition, from the late 19th century to until now, still very popular. I could say maybe in some yoga subculture and cultures, you might hear about it. Light work, ascended masters, that's a big piece within New Age ideas and spiritualism. And that definitely sounds like Jedi stuff as well. The light work, I mean, it's pretty obvious, the connection there, right? With Force abilities on the light side. But the idea of ascended masters, I mean, that sounds pretty much like these Force ghosts. If you think about Obi-Wan or Yoda or whatever, as some examples, and how they're still kind of present even after death. Right? So there you have it. I think that gives us a sense of the light side, right? For the Jedi. And again, maybe that totally resonates with you and great, and you know kind of where you stand. But let's shift our attention to the other side, and maybe even bring in a little quote here I like to say. I've probably said it in some other videos. No enlightenment without endarkenment. Maybe there's truth to that. And if so, we need to explore the darker side and get into the Sith. Okay? Briefly, if we really wanted to take this way too seriously, as opposed to just a fun video, we could say that according to contemporary cosmology and physics, the makeup of the universe is only 4.6% baryonic matter. So like atomic matter, stuff that you can like see, right, and interact with, touch. 24% is cold, dark matter. You can't see it, but we can infer its influence because of gravitational effects and things like that. 71.4% of the universe is dark energy. That basically means that if we wanted to ask the question that I believe Luke asks, is the dark side more powerful? The answer is pretty obviously yes. It is, if you want to kind of equate those two things. But also, maybe no, because our ability to like interact with that side of nature seems to be quite limited. So I guess that maybe balances things back out. But let's look at a quote for the Sith and the dark side. Let's look at this Sith creed that exists. Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall free me. Very different from what we saw with the Jedi, right? Statements where this is clearly much more assertive and aggressive in tone, right? I personally might want to tweak or change some of this, just as I would probably love to tweak what you get in the Jedi code. Mainly because so many of us growing up with Star Wars, I mean, the visuals, great, the storytelling, great, but the philosophy, it kind of sucks. Like, they didn't really do a good job of bolstering that piece, and they've had so many opportunities over the decades to do better, but they really haven't done much to fill it in. It's pretty sad that the best stuff has probably come from a video game from 20 years ago, filling in some of the philosophy and religion. But anyhow, to get back to this Sith creed, right? What can we sort of glean from this? One thing that I think kind of summarizes the philosophical stance, if we're comparing it now to real things, right? Real movements within both philosophy and religion, is something called voluntarism. Like voluntas in Latin for the will. The idea here is that the will is more fundamental than even the intellect. The will to power or the will to pleasure. Those two specifically. Now, will to power, that sounds very Nietzschean and is going to be also associated with things like idea of an Übermensch, and will be taken up by the Nazis and taken up in some forms of Satanism, things like that. So I think that's really important and foundational, that there's something to be said about the strength or power of one's will. And if I were, like I said, tweaking the code or whatever, I would probably bring that more explicitly in that piece. And also something additional about knowledge and the relevance of knowledge to power. Anyhow, number 1, voluntarism. Number 2, I kind of mentioned it, Satanism. Now, I have an entire video on Satanism, so I would really just refer you to that. But generally, the attempt at sort of gaining access to more power, wanting to achieve some form of maybe immortality, becoming godlike, those sound very Sith in nature, right? Very dark side in nature. Social Darwinism, you could see how there might be some maybe connection there to the Sith and the dark side. Nihilism, there are no sort of objective, moral values. That definitely feels like it fits in. I mean, there's even Darth Nihilists. I mean, there's people with these names that are on the dark side, if you will, right? In the Sith tradition. Right? Another thing that I think ought to be brought up here is that when it comes to the Sith, there probably is a relationship to this idea that you find in Ayn Rand's objectivism, that there's a heroic ideal within humanity, and that we're searching to bring about producing passion projects, and that's what really matters foremost. And I definitely think that kind of has some connection too to what you find with the Sith and the dark side of things. Now, what about what they have in common? This is where I think there's real problems with the movies and all the different series and books, etc. They share many things. Okay? For example, the Force is a real thing, right? They both believe that, right? So that's one thing they have in common. Both Sith and Jedi are going to focus on different types of meditation, whether it's battle meditations or insight meditations or whatever. Both have different prophecies. For example, on the light side, you have the chosen one, right? Who will bring balance, the Force type of thing. That's a critical prophecy that you have on the Jedi side. You may not know that on the Sith side, they also have a prophecy of the sith'ari, who will effectively destroy the Sith. And then like a phoenix, kind of like bring it back from the ashes, purified and stronger. And, Anakin fits one, or Darth Bane, this character, is the sith'ari, or Darth Plagueis maybe even. Different characters that have thought that they kind of fit these labels. Another thing that's maybe more controversial, whether you're on the light side or the dark side, you're training, you're trying to become more powerful, right? Hopefully not even trying, which we'll get to in a second, right? Just you're becoming more powerful through practice and discipline, right? You're aiming to become effectively more godlike. And a lot of this feels like apotheosis, which takes us into, if we want to bring religions back into it, things that are kind of shared between the light side and the dark side I think you could bring a lot of the Western monotheisms in. Christianity, or in particular, with this idea of there kind of being, or Judaism, a Messiah, right? Or a chosen one. And with Christianity, this idea of deification, or in Greek, apotheosis, which is attempting to become godlike. God became man so that man could learn to become like God. Even in Mormonism, you have exaltation, these sort of things. So light and dark, it seems like there's an obvious split between the two of them. But there's a lot of overlap, hence the hypocrisy that the Sith might want to try and call out the Jedi on. And in fact, coming from Yoda, this whole idea of like, do or do not, there is no try piece, right? Great wisdom, regardless of what side you're on. But I don't see why the Sith wouldn't totally agree with that exact statement. Mainly because, trying and not trying amount to the same thing. It's the word has the built-in acceptance of the possibility of failure, right? And that in and of itself means that you're not giving 100%. Your will, your power, right? Everything's not there behind it. It's kind of frightening that we even have such a word in the English language. Just like we've got maybe, try, but, all these like qualifiers. Sad, but that's a lot of how life is. I'll try to be there. Maybe I can do this. There's no commitment, right? There's no sincerity. There's no passion or power behind these things. And it seems like both the Jedi and the Sith are focused on the fact that you need that in order to make any real gains, right, in life. So, all right, be that as it may, choosing sides, are you an acolyte of the Jedi or the Sith? Let me know in this video, and I'm more than happy to go into arguments of different elements of philosophy and religion. That's actually my background. My PhD is in philosophy of religion, so more than happy to do that. But really, choosing sides, any side, it amounts to the same thing. Death, I think, because life is change. Death is static. So perhaps it's a mistake, right? to even try and pick one or the other. Maybe the answer is, how I normally in my videos, stay gray. And guess what? There is something called being a gray Jedi. And there's even a gray Jedi code. But unlike my other videos, I'm actually going to stop myself here and say I don't think that's the best move. Because it's not always about just having a balance between the light and the dark. I don't think that's very realistic. Maybe in general, at times, yeah, sure, it'd be great to have a more harmonized or balanced situation. But I think what really matters here is discernment and wisdom. And knowing when one ought to apply more of these like light side principles and techniques, and what situations and circumstances call for bringing in some of these dark side traits or energies. And there is someone in the sort of Star Wars extended universe who kind of fits that bill, and got kind of image of him right here on a hat. I'm not sure if that can really be seen terribly well, but that's Darth Revan, very popular character in the larger Star Wars universe, who at various points was a Jedi, Sith, and kind of all over the place, but was a free thinker in that regard, right? And could move between the two, depending upon what the circumstances called for. And that, to me, seems like mastery. So, in this case, we're going to stay gray, but only in the sense of keeping an open mind and knowing when to side with the light or with the dark.